Think about it being, oh, here we go. Now we got it. All right.
All right, so got it. And it's still doing its thing, and here we are.
Now,
Great, okay, good. And
all right.
okay, so got it. Okay, now I got to turn that off, or pause it rather, and do this. And you mind if I record it on the computer? It's also just
do everything we need to
better
do.
quality. It's just whatever. So let me grab, hey, if there's anybody here, hi. We haven't really publicized this, but we should. And when we do Encore, we should get on maybe 5 minutes early.
Oh, I think that's a great
Really
idea.
just, yeah.
That's a great idea.
Let me get my act again right here.
Maybe I'll just narrate what's going on in Jeff's apartment. So as you can see, there's a fireplace, which may not be a real fireplace. There's a rocking chair, which I think is a real, oh, sorry, I was just narrating.
Yeah, narrating my office. Yeah, cool. All right, let me take a breath. Hey, man.
Hey.
Yeah. So you said you're ready for me, huh?
I'm ready.
Yeah. Well, here we are, Jeff Salzman, Encore Delight, our weekly conversation about, the state of the evolving world.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, and how this integral perspective can help us.
Yeah.
There's ways in which I could use help in general is maintaining a sense of hope and possibility.
Yeah.
Some like continued motivation. I guess it's similar, but just like that my part, and by extension, all of our parts in this, like we're these bit parts in a play, right? All the world's a scene, all the men and women merely players. Nice. That is important and worth continuing to do with gusto and not just phoning it in.
Goddamn right. Yeah.
And then maybe some almost like a kind of philosophical holding, like it's okay that it's so, like you always say, evolution is beautiful, but it's not pretty. Just a reminder of an okayness with the ugliness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I could jump off there if you want.
Sure. And then I have actual daily news content as well, but let's.
Yeah, but yeah, I think it's a nice way to start because it's so great actually, because it's something I've been thinking about. And one of the things that we talk about in Integral in the evolution of consciousness is that humanity and also individual humans move through these stages of, I forget what the term is, but anyway, we move from egocentric to ethnocentric to nation-centric to world-centric. And world-centric is, the green postmodern, where you're really able to view multi-cultures and the karmas of history and that sort of thing. But there's a stage beyond that, which is cosmocentric, where you can look at the world from a new subject. Green looks at the world, the new subject is the world, and it can see all of the stuff in the world. The cosmocentric is the new identity is with the cosmos, and now that's the new subject, or at least our little part of the cosmos. I think the cosmos is a little big to identify with, but how about our solar system? And so you're looking at Earth as an object, and that's not in any way, it's a bad word in a way, but you're looking at it as the thing that you're seeing. And what you can see from this cosmocentric perspective, first of all, we talked about this before, but there's a certain heartbreak that just sort of wants to come on first thing.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Even if you're looking back at the dawn of time and the first life, and then the first consciousness, and all the nature and all that's beauty, the evolving life and the big bangs of consciousness, and then another big bang of self-consciousness in human beings. And then that's where the integral map, in a sense, begins, is when human beings become conscious of being actually not embedded in this nature and, seeing nature as an object. And at that point, it's like a grandparent watching children grow up. There is a heartbreak. If you're not a heartbroken grandparent watching your grandchildren, I don't know what to tell you. But also the beauty and the fights and the scrapes and the tragedies and the wrong turns and all of the stuff that make up life. And we can see this on the planet, and we can see the stages. And there's something about it where at Green, we still sort of want to sort it out in a way. It's like we see this mess of suffering on the planet. And it's like, what's going on here? And the one pattern that crosses all cultures and actually crosses all species is that the strong oppress the weak. That's it. That's the first pattern. That's the pattern Green sees. And in a sort of a technicolor way. And that it's true. And from an integral cosmocentric perspective, we can see that that's true. But we can see that mechanism actually is the generator of this evolutionary force that we can also see. And that this has come from somewhere and it's going somewhere. And that we can, we've talked about this, we can try to sort out why and the blame and all of this sort of thing. But ultimately, it's like, I wonder, one of my favorite Buddhist teachings is that karma is unfathomable. It's just, we can't sort this out. We just have to love it. We have to give up sorting it out. We have to surrender, and just love it, basically. And that's a good place to stand. It's not as solid as the previous places we had to stand because it's moving, but it's a good place to stand when we look at these issues, all the issues that we look at and solve. Anyway, it stopped there. I don't know if any of that made sense.
No, I think it's just such important context. And I think that's part of the problem, part of the opportunity with the news is to be able to not get into the narrowing of the awareness that the mind wants with the news. Like the kind of reductionist mind wants to see each of these things as little problems to focus on or to solve or to worry about. And the kind of profit making part of the news wants that too, because it's engagement and eyeballs and money and all this stuff. And like, oh yeah, the more you can get involved in that, the better it is for the ratings and the ads and the money and all that stuff. But it's really about, if we want to see what the benefit is to us, it's really about, if every time I saw something in the news that disturbed me, and it's a mindfulness practice. If it was a call to remember the greater perspective of my role in my life and our role as humans in the evolution of humans, that'd be an amazing, okay, what if that is the function of the news? What if all of it is just like challenging our awareness, like in meditation or mindfulness practice of like, can you focus on your breath? Now here's a thing that happened. Here's a thought that came up, but can you focus on your breath? And can you just do the one simple thing? And every time you see somebody getting beaten to death by someone on TV, or the missiles or the Ebola or whatever it is, in addition, hopefully, if you have that influence, there might be some practical response you can do that'll make somebody's life better. And to remember, what is this actually all about?
Well, yeah. No, I think that's a beautiful practice. And I always love the definition of practice. I bring it up all the time, that it's the thing we do to be faithful, not to be successful. So, we do the best we can at that. And it's just like meditation. Meditation's not about being successful. It's about just sitting down and doing it, And the thing that distracts us actually gets to be included. And the thing that takes us off track gets to be seen. And then we come back on track. And it also takes us back to just the focus, and it's almost, too banal to bring up, but it's true. And it's that love is where we want to end up, or that's where we want to, that's the place we want to look at it from, where we can just see the whole catastrophe with love.
Mm.
And there are a lot of practices, any kind of loving kindness practice where you would take the villain into account and send loving kindness, and the victim, and this one, and how this one, and just literally generate love. And this may actually be a thing in the sort of cosmic physics. There may be some liquid love that we're actually helping when we do that. I always love something that Ken Wilber would say, is that thinking integral thoughts is a good thing. You're actually adding to the noosphere. And so it's not just, a distraction, it's actually an engagement. And then it's an appropriate one, because otherwise, these tragedies are abstractions, and in some ways they need to be so that we can live our lives, but not in a way that's dissociated. We want to be, what do they call it? Non-attachment. It's not detachment. It's just that we can allow all of these things to be there, actually, and just be in our awareness and not get gripped. And I love what you said at the beginning. You talked about how the mind wants to narrow. And we talk about that self-contraction, that actually being a self is inherently painful. That's Buddhist teaching, because there's a contraction that has formed Ankur, and there's a contraction that's formed Jeff. And we're always trying to loosen that up, and let it in. And breath, of course, that's the aerator. But love's the thing that's the container. So something like that, maybe.
Yeah.
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 So what's in the news?
Yeah, I mean,
What
for me,
else? What's
it's still, for me, it's still, Israel and Hamas and Gaza, and
yeah,
I mean, that's been in the news since before I was born, and definitely at various points in my life, especially when I lived in the Middle East.
Yeah.
But it's definitely in the news for everybody right now. And there's one phrase I heard where the president of the United States, Joe Biden, you may have heard of him. He went over there, maybe, I think he's left, but he was there for a while, 7 hours. And he pledged his unilateral support for Israel. I heard that. And then I read some articles where he's either, you can tell me about this, he's either a politician or he's some kind of integral dude, because he was saying all kinds of things that were pretty on different levels. He was all mixed up, or it was like on different levels. I don't know. So, and I try to be hopeful and charitable whenever I can. But I just, that phrase, unilateral support, there's different ways we could go with this. I'm just going to take it as axiomatic that giving somebody weapons is not unilateral support. It's not really support. Like, I think he's that's supportive of the conflict. I would say, like, giving like having a giant multi-billion-dollar military aid package and then giving more is supporting the conflict, supporting armed conflict. So but I don't think that's his goal. I mean, he's unilateral support of Israel. Right. And so, I mean, what I would like to think about right now and offer from like an integral place, what does unilateral support of Israel really look like? Like, what would it be to make a decision as this giant superpower with all the money in the world and a lot of influence and some really like bad reputation for a lot of people, but like, what would it really look like to support the long-term interests of the people living there? Because I just don't see how it's giving weapons to anybody. And and it's just to put it out there, it's not just the US, there's lots of countries who have power and are interested in maintaining their power all over the world that are giving weapons to some people over there.
Yeah.
And I don't find it very supportive. You know, and a friend of mine, and there's also this like subtle, there's like a shame thing going on. A friend of mine was saying, he's like, you know what? It's so embarrassing for the evolution of humans. Why can't these people get along? You know, and just really like, there's this shame of like, these people, they can't get along. And there's, you know, there's truth to that. And frankly, it's pathetic. It's backwards. Marshall Rosenberg invented nonviolent communication, and these people are still doing this shit. It's like, really? But there's all of these people all around the world who don't live there and don't honestly give a damn about the people who do live there, and that are contributing hundreds of thousands or millions or billions of dollars to perpetuate this conflict for their own narrow interests, which from my like greater self perspective, I'm like, that's not even in your interest. So, but to go back to the actual question of like, what, I mean, from an integral perspective, not from like the amber blue thing, but like actually for the people that live there, like what would support look like? Like real support.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, well, there's two things that integral can do. One is integral can explain all of why those people think the way they do. Yeah, so that's one thing. But what could be actually helpful? Well, first of all, it may be actually helpful to realize that people think that way and they're going to act that way. And that's the world that we live in as we look at this world as it's evolving and we look at it from this perspective. But that aside, what we actually can do to help, and this would be the integral, I think, perspective on it. And this would include the best of green, the best of orange, and the best of everything. But that would be to help people be as healthy as possible and safe where they are, and so that they can grow, and that the growth is natural. It's kind of like the way you would do with a kid, you know, just keep them safe, don't let them get into too much trouble. So that is that would be the guiding principle to me. And I don't know what that would be, but it would be something that would be different than what we've had. And maybe it would be some sort of multinational government of Gaza. I don't know. You know, I don't know. These kinds of things could go any which way. But we don't want to
Hey,
you know,
Jeff.
I think, you know, I think not, I mean, I think in the world going forward, in your generation, Ankur, and your kids' generation, the idea of being this arms supplier to the world will be one of the great obscenities of history, okay? That realization is coming online. It's just like, why are we sending anything to Saudi Arabia so they can rain it down on the Yemenis? I mean, no. I mean, and so I'm with you on that. But we're operating from a stage of development that maybe Joe Biden has flashes of, but no, he's over there trying to keep things from wildly spinning out of control. Actually, that's how he sees it, at least. And he's doing his thing from, you know, the establishment perspective, which is basically kind of modernist, you know, just keep things from bothering us, from blowing up in our face. You know, these people are incorrigible, whatever, just keep them from being too much of a trouble to the world. And that's what it's been. And we can see that wasn't good enough. Something more has to happen. And I think it will over time. And again, I don't know what shape it's going to be. I think it will. One of the things that will happen is the continued evolution of the people involved. I mean, we've talked about, you know, that conflicts are ultimately, especially when people are nudging up a next level, which they are. They're moving into a modernist view. a more fully modernist view of, individual rights, and let's trade, and, let's let these ancestral vengeance cycles go, that I think that'll continue to happen. And that's really key. What do you think of that?
I want more.
Yeah, are you? Okay.
I want a plan. I want to like, what's great about giving military aid, $1 billion military aid, is that there's like a bureaucrat somewhere in the military, or maybe there's a whole building of them, that are like, oh, I know exactly how to translate that $1 billion into action. And it's going to be this many missiles and this many jets and this many attaches, or, training. I don't know what they do. But they know what they're doing. They're doing it well, I'm sure. And like, I want that level of detail.
Yeah.
Like, all right, well, what is the plan? What if we're going to have $1 billion of or $12 billion of non-military aid? Like, what's the plan?
Yeah.
And
I guess there is a package of non-military aid. It's going directly to Gaza.
Yeah, I mean, that to me is
I don't know. I'm not going to argue for.
It's just so.
Well,
just
I would say
it's like very like here are the bombs, and then here are the sleeping bags after you drop the bombs. It's like well,
I know.
But and I'm colonized. My mind has been infected with this beautiful virus of mediation by Ken Cloak, this amazing mediator that I'm going to talk to tomorrow about this. And
oh, good. And
hopefully we can post it on both of our feeds, because I know, he's just a genius, and like, no matter what you talk to him about, it's just so like, what did he say? My wife was quoting one of his videos where he said, the first casualty in any conflict is empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And he starts from this like level of depth that's just incredible.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, so I'm like, well, can we just have like massive large scale mediation and just get, I don't know, obviously I don't know anything, but that I know that's got to be part of the solution. But I'm just like, what else if like Biden really wanted to support Israel and not just continue business as usual with like, war is a disturbance to international trade, so we should avoid it, but we got to keep these people happy, so we'll give them some bombs so they kill these other people. Like, if we actually cared, what would we do?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that what I would push back on a bit is that's sort of that would be true if everybody thought that way. But they don't actually want to mediate. I mean, a lot of people don't.
But there's a role that's that might be true, but there's a role for leadership, and like leadership, really, it's by definition, it's influential. And so when the people in the positions of power on whatever side, on all sides, on every side, and the people who are like giving and allocating where the resources go, like that has a giant influence. And people's current, it's almost like a phenomenological argument. People's current behavior does not express what like deep inside they know to be true. It's some sort of black box function of their internal inputs with these external inputs of what leadership is doing and what the incentives are and how everything's aligned. And that's what comes out as our behavior.
Oh, good. I like that explanation, but you got to run it by me again.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, so
no, it was good. I just need another.
Yeah, we'll use like my life. There's what I really want to do with my life,
mm-hmm.
and what I really believe is like my values,
mm-hmm.
and then there's my actions in my everyday life. And there's a function. There's like a box that goes in between that input of like, like what my heart is singing about, and then the output of what I'm doing. And it's not one-to-one, because there's other inputs. There's like the laws in my country and what's legal. There's like the ways in which my history and my cultural affiliation may change that. There's the shame I feel. There's what I'm getting paid to do and what I'm not getting paid to do. Like if I got paid the same to bake bread as I do to do coaching, I would bake bread. I don't know, but it's like, that's not the current economic structure, right? Like I bake bread every day because I love it, But so that's so these people in like the settlers in these occupied territories, or the people in the camps, or the people who are like supporting Hamas, just like the teenage kids who are like having discussions about this in Palestine and arguing about whether or not they should, and by support Hamas, I just mean say something positive or not, just like that level. There's like what people really want, and then what they feel their options are, what their leaders tell them, what their parents tell them, what they get paid to do, who's giving them which resources, who's buying the iPhones, all of this stuff. And there's many more dimensions. I'm not saying that's what leads to the actions. And so the people just saying things publicly that are like not aligned with, like, they're not saying, God, what I really want is a mediation, or what I really want is just to like share my grief. And then there's been all these beautiful projects of Israeli and Palestinian, non-Israeli Palestinian people coming together and just sharing grief about, like, all of like mothers whose sons have died, getting together and just talking about it. And there's all these amazing projects like that. Like, why are people not asking for more of that? I don't think it's just because they don't want more of that. There's many more inputs beside that. And so I'm just advocating the strength of the role of leadership and cash money to influence what people say they want.
Yeah, right on. I think what you're saying is true. I do think that there's another dimension that development actually reveals. And that is that when you talk about, people in their own hearts and in their own minds, they want to live a peaceful life. They want to raise their kids. They want, they have good intentions, and then the system, if you will, and money and leaders and the institutions and all of that come in and sort of thwart that. That interior that you're talking about also evolves, and earlier stages of it. I don't want to share my grief with the enemy. I actually don't. I just want to share my grief with my family and my clan. And so that circle of who's worthy of moral compassion in general, that's one of the markers of development. And in tribal and traditional cultures, warrior cultures, they're smaller than they are in modern cultures, actually, those circles.
Yeah, of course.
And then when you get to postmodern, and when you're talking about what you're talking about, where the enemies actually get together, the mothers, that's a high level. There's a lot of people doing that, but that's a high level thing.
Yeah, that's totally.
And there's more and more people doing that. And, and I love, when you talk about the teenagers in Gaza, they're getting inputs, not just from the sort of ethnocentric, religious, we're in a battle of good and evil and God and all that stuff. They're getting the internet, they're getting, it's hard to overestimate the difference in their consciousness versus their parents once they take over. I don't know. I mean, there's still going to be plenty of both, but yeah. Anyway, so that circle of who's included in all these good things you're talking about is something that grows, and that's significant.
Yeah, and then of course I go to thinking of, how does development happen? How did it happen for me as the guy I know best? How does it happen for other people? Yeah. And it can happen, in a moment.
Yeah.
It can happen, like, it happens through travel. It happens through seeing, through, like, many people don't travel because they want a consciousness expanding experience. Many people do now, but some people just want to go on vacation. They take a wrong turn, they end up in a slum, and they're like, oh shit.
Yeah. Get me back in my bubble.
Yeah. But
like, travel bubble.
My world just broke, or many people, like religious people or people from a traditional society, they go to college because they want a job. And then they're like forced to take some sort of like history of Western civilization, DI, whatever course. And then they're like, oh, boom, like these things, people end up doing mushrooms because they wanted to have a good time. But then they're like, oh man, I just melted. And now I know that Pachamama is a planet and she has an emotion. And now I'm one with the earth. Like we don't actually necessarily want these things, but they can happen really, really quickly.
Yeah, they
And
can.
just in the way that like you give somebody a gun, they didn't need to like you just gave them some sort of like space technology and now they have it.
Yeah.
And I think we can, I think what I want to think about is how can we enable that for people?
Yeah.
Like what is like the space technology of like increasing in your complexity in your interior that we could use $1 billion to help facilitate for
Well,
those that are ready.
yeah, if I had to think of one, it would be hard pressed I'd be hard pressed to think of something that would be uh, any better than the internet.
Yeah.
Basically, it's just in terms of feeding in new perspectives. It also has its dark side where, it's at one point in development, especially when you move to a new stage, it's like when I took Jesus Christ as my own personal savior, and I'm, 11, 10, whatever years old, and I'm a church camp. That's a whole new, beautiful, magical world. And I want to stay there. I don't want these other perspectives. Any perspectives of science would feel like regression to me. It would feel like I would be losing this thing I just got. And so people need to stay and this is integral. It's like people get to be who they are. They get to think what they think, get to see the world as they do. And eventually they're going to get bored with it. As, I continue to develop because I went to 9th grade science class. And it's like, wait a second, none of this makes sense anymore, this religion thing. And I can remember moving into that. And then all of a sudden, that's a new world of rationality and information and analysis and understand. Oh my God, And then you move beyond that and beyond that. And so everybody gets to be where they are. And you hit the $1 million question, Ankur. It's like, why do we even develop? And what's behind it? And why do some people develop more and further, and why do some not? And why we develop, the answer is because it's built into the cosmos. Development and growth is actually one of the primary physics of the cosmos. So that's why. And why some people and cultures go further, if you will, than others is a mystery. But in general, we move to the center of gravity of the culture that we're born into by the time we're 16, 18, something like that, move into early adulthood. So if you're born into a traditional culture, you move from warrior to traditional. It's getting nice, stable there. And if you're in a modern country, you move into that. And not always, there's some people who, the answer that has always been most satisfying to me is that karma. It's like, who knows why?
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad you bring that back in here because it's on my mind when you say this. So there's two things that I think really give my life meaning. One is hanging out with people I like, just and expressing love. That's ultimately what I do. But if it were just that, there would be something lacking. And so the other thing I'm trying to do in general with all of my activities is participate in other people's evolution. And the straight karma, destiny, no free will crowd, which you encounter in like Western rationalism and also in India, my wanderings there with the mystics, they're equally present in both, would say you cannot influence somebody else's development. And obviously I don't know what's true and what's not true, but I don't like that. and what I'm trying to do is influence other people's development. And so from the developmental perspective, is that you must believe that that's possible. That is why I have like integral life and all this other stuff, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. One of the ways we influence their development is by doing the best we can to provide them with healthy life conditions so that their growth can happen. It's like having a rose in the garden. You want to make sure it's getting everything it needs.
Yeah. And
not being stressed and not being cut down and not being underwatered or underfed.
Yeah. So this is where like
that's how it happens. And then
HCR
it's like a kid, you're not making your daughter grow. She's doing that under her own power.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you create the loving circumstances for her to do it in a way that's healthy. And that's, that's one way that we can look at other, people in need, or however, or these conflicts that go on. So, yeah. Yes, we can influence. And then also when it's like with, it's like me I'm peddling my integral worldview here, so it's like, I don't just go up to anybody. I used to, but I don't anymore. Just go up to anybody and say, hey, do you want a new worldview? I got this really great worldview. You're going to love it. That's how I was for, 2 decades. And incidentally, your worldview is 2 levels down, but we'll work with it.
Just so you know, hierarchy exists and you're lower than I am. So, hey.
Yeah, exactly. So, so shall we have our conversation here? So, yeah. So, but now I offer it to people who want it.
Yeah.
And that's way better because there are people who are ready for this worldview, or they want it, and for them, here it is, my best shot at it.
Yeah.
And that's, far more, that's a transition I went through.
That's great.
Helps
probably is like
me
much
relax.
more relaxing for you. More
pleasant. Totally. Way more relaxing to me, because you can't really, this is, that's the part of, you talked about, you can't make other people develop that people talk about. There's some truth to that.
Oh, yeah.
And I always love that. This is another one of the Buddhist teachings I love, is that you cannot save another person, nor may you. I love that. You can't, you can help them do what their karma is asking them to do, but you can't save them or, fix them into something that you want,
Yeah.
So actually, if you have a couple more minutes, I thought I might bring something up that I think actually illuminates this. Last time we talked, you talked about the libelous, slanderous Sam Harris.
Oh yes,
Okay?
that arch villain.
I know. I want to just share something that I saw, and I made a note of it. Hang on here. And I think it gets to the mistake he makes in his analysis. Let's see here. Okay. All right. So he's talking about the fight between cultures. Actually, in a way, he's talking about the fight between traditional and modern. That traditional will attack civilians. They always have. And so will modern, but in an arm's length kind of way. And so here's what
they'll just like lie about it.
Yeah, well, they'll lie about it, but what you won't get is modern soldiers going into a community and just slaughtering people.
There wasn't that in any of the wars that we engaged in the second half of the 20th century?
Yeah, there were, but that would not be a modern impulse. That would be a pre-modern impulse. Let me just let me just say what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's talking about people who will strategically put their own non-combatants into the line of fire so they can inflict further violence upon their enemies, knowing that their enemies have a more civilized moral code that will render them reluctant to shoot back for fear of killing or maiming innocent non-combatants. And I think that's true, actually, that happens. I think that's smart on the part of traditional people who are fighting modernity. And again, I'm using very big, broad brushes here. There's traditional and red eruptions out of modernity all the time, but I'm talking about the actual philosophy and the worldview. Okay. And he says that if anywhere in this universe, cynicism and nihilism can be found together in their most perfect forms, it is here. And this is what I disagree with. It's not cynicism and nihilism that is motivating people who would do this. Pre-modern people will use modern codes of behavior against modernists. They're not stupid, they're just pre-modern. Of course they would, they would use that. And
that's an advantage they could have. It's a vulnerability.
Absolutely an advantage they would have. And they would be crazy not to use it, especially when they think at the worldview they're at. And this is where Sam gets it wrong. It would be cynicism and nihilism for people like Sam to do such a thing, because they're at a modern worldview. For people who are holy warriors, literally in their hearts, they're warriors of God. They're trying to create, the kingdom of God on earth, and the blood will be shed and martyrs will be made. And that's a whole different, it's anything but nihilism. It's actually, a beautiful vision of paradise that they're willing to die for, as warriors and traditionalists have always been willing to die. So I just wanted to see if that made any sense to you.
It does. And ultimately, Sam Harris just has such limited interest for me. But the move you're making is, I think, important for all of us. Yeah. And the idea is to not evaluate someone else's behavior based on our standards.
Thank you.
In terms of trying to understand it. Obviously, we could have a moral judgment. Fine. Yeah. And I do all the time. But the idea is okay, why expect this person to act like I would act? They're not fundamentally where I am. And so if we want to understand their strategy better and ultimately be able to work with them constructively to come up with a solution, it's better to understand where they're coming from with this.
Yes.
So
yes.
I said, that's a beautiful move.
Yes, it is. I mean, and there's one more thought I had on this, and this is, I just finished listening to The Oregon Trail, which is a memoir of this young guy from Harvard who went on the wagon trains in early 1800s into the West. No. And he was 20, 21 years old. So he was super educated, in all the European way. And he goes and he veers off and he does his own adventures, and he lives with the Indians and he befriends the Indians, and he, and it's a wonderful first person account of Indians, no presentism, because he's writing it contemporaneously. And he's talking about his one Indian companion that he'd had all these.
The whole time you're saying Indian, you mean indigenous people of North America?
Yes.
You're not talking about Italy and Dosa and sages in the Himalayas.
I'm talking about the First Nations people.
Yeah, right.
Yes. And these were the ones in the Rocky Mountains. Yes, of course. So anyway, he calls them Indians, and then I grew up with that too. Yeah. Anyway, his Native American companion, the Whirlwind, he talks about him as just as true and brave and good a companion as you could ever have, and his beautiful face, and that they would sit around at night and at the campfire, and they had this ways of communicating that there was reasonably good communication with certain words and sign language that they could do, and that the Whirlwind would tell him stories about how they would raid their ancestral enemies' villages and throw the babies on the fire and cut the Achilles tendons of take the little kids, take the women that they wanted, kill the rest, take the warriors and torture them to death. And that he would tell it with the same wide-eyed innocence and a certain kind of, it was sort of, it would be what happened to him too if he were captured. He wasn't complaining about this. This is just what their life was. And that there was, in a way, a warrior's code, that they would respect the warrior who would die honorably in these torture situations. And it's just, modern minds can't wrap their heads around this.
Yeah.
We can't be expected to. But this is this was our history for 99% of it, this kind of thing. You know, so there you go.
All right, I'm gonna. I want to close with a slightly more positive note.
Well, just beware presentism.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. But this is kind of similar. It's a mirror of it, and like that, if that's our past, which I think is probably true. I mean, there's many different parts of our past, right?
Oh, totally.
But, you know,
and there are many of which we lived in peace, and you know, but
yeah, that's a thread that's always been there.
Yeah, yeah.
But here's how this ends, Jeff. Let me tell you the future.
Oh, here's how this ends.
Yeah, and this is what I've been peddling my whole life. But I don't need anyone to believe it because I know it's true. It ends with people falling in love, and that's part of our, like, the biological imperative for reproduction is an asset. It's not always an asset, but it's an asset here. And people falling in love with people they did not grow up with, that do not look like them, that do not believe what they believe, I think is like one of the primary movers and shakers to getting people out of wherever their context is and into the future.
Totally, man. Oh, I love that. And if I may say, that is a cosmocentric view, and that you just look at the whole world, just love the whole thing. And it doesn't matter where anybody's coming from. Everybody's got their karma, you know, but you love them all. And that's the final biggest circle, you know. And actually, maybe there's a bigger circle that includes other planets and the cosmos in general. I don't know. But what a beautiful way to end. And thank you, man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, I think the perspective you brought today over and over, I mean, it's just classic Jeff in the best way. I think it's going to be very, very, very helpful for people.
Oh, man, thank you so much. Right back at you. And so we'll do this again.
Awesome. See you next week, man.
All right. See you next week. Shall I keep us on for a second? I'll end this. Yeah. All right. So what that means is, bye, everybody's. We're going to start publicizing this. So if you want to join us live, we're doing this at 11 p.m. Mountain Time, 10 Pacific.
AM.
Did I say AM? Yeah, AM for sure, mornings. And it's on Daily over YouTube. So there you go.